we are joined by my friend, my colleague, the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show, Ty Schmit, for this week's Super Bowl six-pack.
Good to see you as always, Schefty. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but the fact that we only have one football game left this year is kind of putting me in a little bit of a pretzel. A little sickness is going around our entire office right now. So if my voice is going in and out, I apologize. Perfect time to get it right before we go down to New Orleans for the Super Bowl week. But I mean, this is the best. This is what we do all this stuff for. I'm so excited for this game.
And Ty, your voice is starting to go. Your eyes, you look a little tired there. You been getting sleep or no?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the throes of having a 4 month old. 3 days she'll sleep all the way through the night. Last night she was up every 40 minutes, screaming and crying. So I had to sleep on the floor in her room last night. So no, I didn't get a great night's sleep, but I got more than enough juice. Couple incredible championship games this past weekend, but it was also I'd say more so the week of the coaching hires with a lot of those getting filled. So let's hop right into the six-pack, Shefty, and topic number one. What do you make of the whole Dallas Cowboys situation hiring Brian Schottenheimer? We heard the comments from Jerry. Not exactly a glowing endorsement, kind of, talking people into it only the way Jerry can, but interesting situation. I think you kind of alluded to it last time you came on Pat's show. The tea leaves were kind of saying, hey, this was going to happen, but what do you make of that whole situation?
First of all, it was pretty wild to watch Jerry on the dais with Brian Schottenheimer next to him talking about the fact that this is one of the biggest risks he's taken, right? That was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Brian Schottenheimer is strong enough mentally and tough enough mentally to say, you know what? I don't care. I finally got a chance to be a head coach like my father did. And if I can somehow get this team to and win a Super Bowl, this would be from my father, Marty Schottenheimer, the great football coach who never won a Super Bowl, who was there in Cleveland during some AFC Championship game heartbreaks against the Denver Broncos. And now Brian Schottenheimer gets to carry the sword forward in the name of the family to try to defend their honor and prove Jerry right and win a Super Bowl. Kind of cool the way that all happens. And I go back to Friday night, Ty. I'm home, sitting, doing some work, and my phone rings. And it was Jerry Jones. Now, I don't recall Jerry having called me before. I don't think he has. I've spoken to him on the phone a couple of times, somehow, some way. We've done some functions together. He and I did a Q&A together in Las Vegas for some group sometime, a 60-minute conversation, like a TED Talk thing, he and I on stage. And he has always been great. But he called me on, right? And he goes on about how Brian Schottenheimer is nothing more than an assistant coach. He's always been an assistant coach. This is what he's done. These are his qualifications. How could people even be talking about him as a head coach? He's an assistant coach. And then he stopped on a dime. And he goes, but you know what, Adam? He's Brian the assistant no more. He's now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And it was so funny the way that he set it all up, led to it, and then bam, delivered the punchline of Brian Schottenheimer being the head coach. I said, Jerry, am I allowed to report that? He said, absolutely. Can I quote you, Jerry? Absolutely. So I'm typing up what he's saying as I'm on the phone with him to get out the story. It was pretty funny, the whole thing, the way it all transpired. And I was thinking, well, why would he call me on a Friday night? And I have to pay tribute here because I do believe that in a prior year, he would have called my dear friend Chris Mortensen to tell him that he was hiring Brian Schottenheimer. But because Mort, unfortunately, is no longer with us, he knew that he reached out to somebody connected to Mort, an extension of Mort. And that was Jerry Friday night. And I really appreciate that and thank him and his family for that call because it made me think of Mort when he called because Mort and Jerry had a great relationship and Mort loved talking to Jerry all the time. And I think that that was just a reflection of that, an extension of that. And it was meaningful because I believe it had something to do with that. Now, I might be imagining that, but Jerry in a prior year would have called Mort. So it made me think of Mort. And Mort also covered Marty Schottenheimer. And Marty Schottenheimer once worked at ESPN. And Brian Schottenheimer takes over. And I've known Brian for a long time. It all kind of fits together. And so I know some Cowboys fans aren't necessarily excited about the hire, But here's the truth on these things, Ty. There are 7, 8 hires every year. Most of them wash out. Some of them hit. And Brian Schottenheimer has just as much of a chance to succeed as a head coach as Ben Johnson or Liam Coen or Aaron Glenn or anybody hired in this cycle. We will see how it goes and see how it plays out. I know we're rooting for the guy. Hope it works out. And thank you, Mr. Jones, for the call.
And all the reports say that, he got a ringing endorsement from Dak, which might have been a big part of the reason why he got the job. Dak's played the best football of his career over the last several years now. How much Brian Schottenheimer had to do with that, how much Mike McCarthy had to do with that, we don't know. But you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's not like the Cowboys have been, this scion of success the last several years. So, I mean, who's to say that Brian Schottenheimer isn't the guy who gets them back to an NFC championship and maybe a Super Bowl? We never know. We get these top of the line candidates every year who end up getting fired in 3 years. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the difference?
And here's the thing. A dozen years ago, Brian Schottenheimer was the hot guy. He was Ben Johnson. He was Aaron Glenn. He was Liam Coen. He was that hot guy 12 years ago. He interviewed for jobs. His very first interview was on Wayne Heisinger's private plane for the Miami Dolphins head coaching job. Later on, he turned down a head coaching opportunity or an interview with the Buffalo Bills. I remember that distinctly. So he was one of those guys in the cycle in his early 40s that everybody wanted to hire and nobody did. So, Jerry, being a guy that's been around now, that's gained more experience, and we'll see how it works out.
And Pat has mentioned, I think he spent 1 year with the Colts while Pat was there. He had nothing but glowing things to say about Schotty. Everyone that I've heard talk about him has nothing but good things to say about him. Obviously, everyone knows what kind of respect Marty Schottenheimer has around the NFL. So I think a lot of people are rooting for him, especially when you see kind of the blowback from Cowboys fans and how they react to him getting the job. So we'll see.
Before we go to topic number 2, I just want to share one of my great Marty Schottenheimer stories of all time. I was just starting at the Denver Post, and there was a room, I could see it now, it was not very big, but there used to be weekly conference calls with the opposing head coaches. And in the first week of the season, Marty was coaching the Chiefs. They lost a game with a controversial ending, and he had to explain what happened in that particular game. There was a reporter that worked at that time for the Denver Post, very loud guy, and he was on the phone talking to his friend about a divorce that he was going through with his soon-to-be ex-wife. And his friend was explaining to the reporter what exactly happened. Marty was doing the conference call at the exact same moment. So we had at one side of the room, Marty explaining his thing, and when at the other side of the room, this reporter listening to his friend's explanation. Marty finishes his answer. Like, you couldn't have timed this better. Marty finishes his answer, and the reporter shouts out, "Well, that's a sorry excuse." And Marty pauses and goes, "Are you talking to me?" I'm like, no, sorry, Marty, sorry. That was somebody else. I always remembered it. It was one of the funniest things that I've ever seen on a conference call. And Marty was offended and sounded like he wanted to punch somebody when he heard it. And he wasn't even talking to him. Can we beep out, Taylor, can we beep out the F in there or what? Yeah. Yeah, just beep it, right? Anyway.
That's incredible. I've never heard that before.
I can't think of Marty Schottenheimer and not think of that story.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is absolutely hilarious. So, hey, we'll see. Maybe Brian Schottenheimer's got a little bit of that in him as well. The willing to go punch someone in the face if they offend him. That could probably serve him well as the Cowboys head coach. Let's move on to topic number 2, Schefty, going from a first-time head coach to what will be the oldest head coach in the history of the NFL. What do you think the most interesting part about the Pete Carroll hire in Las Vegas is?
Well, there's so many things that are interesting about this. Number one, he's still teaching classes at USC right now. So a professor at USC is about to become, or is, the new head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think this actually was a smart hire for this reason. They're in a division with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton. They know that without a quarterback, they can't compete with those teams. So they're bringing in a coach to help establish the culture that they want under the new owners to help turn around the program, to get it up and running, and to buy time to find a quarterback so that a couple of years down the line, they can re-enter the coaching cycle and then pluck the young, hot assistant at that time. Pete Carroll wants to coach. They need order and structure and experience. It's a marriage waiting to happen. It's hard to imagine, and he may prove me wrong, that Pete Carroll is going to be vying for a Super Bowl title next year. You never know in the NFL, but in that division, that's hard to imagine without a quarterback. Hopefully he can. But in the interim, he's going to have that organization be respectable and tough and disciplined because he's a great coach. So he's almost like a bridge coach while they help rebuild the program. And he wants to coach bad enough that that's what he wants to do. And you just think like Pete Carroll and Tom Brady played against each other, squared off against each other in one of the great Super Bowls of all time, where Pete didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch and Brady led the comeback. Awesome game. And now those two guys are the brain trust of the Las Vegas Raiders. And the GM they hired, John Spytek, has done great work in Tampa for a long period of time. A Michigan man, played 1 year with Tom Brady at Michigan. John Julie's been through a lot in his life. Great respect for him. And so this was, I think, the logical right move to make for the Raiders at this point in time. You could go hire young, hot assistant. And what is that going to do? Within 2 years, people are going to be calling for his job because in that division, it's going to be so difficult to compete in it.
Yeah, and I can't remember what the exact stat is. Obviously, they had Antonio Pierce as an interim, but is it they've had 5 head coaches in 6 years? So it's like, you're exactly right. You have to nail down the culture, because I always think of all those years in, the mid 90s to late 90s when the Browns or one of those teams was drafting at the top of the draft and you're drafting a quarterback, unless you're drafting a guy like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, someone who is going to be a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, they could have all the skill. If you don't have the culture in place, that guy's going to get swallowed up and he's going to get run out of town and he's going to be deemed a bust. So they have to get the culture right.
And the other thing that's just fascinating to me is that Pete Carroll is going to be 74 years old this season. I want you to think about this. There's never been a head coach in the NFL who's coached a game at the age of 74. He will be the oldest coach in NFL history, and he is an inspiration and a wonder with the way he carries himself. I told this story, having O's out in Seattle, performing for the Seahawks. We walked into the Seahawks meeting room together. Pete had music. I think there may have been a DJ, basketball hoops. The guys are going nuts. He gives him a talk. He brings up O's. O's performs. He goes through more meetings. I'm just telling you, that guy has got more energy than people half his age. He is incredible. Incredible. And so it's hard not to root for him. But I think of all the old coaches that we've seen patrol the sidelines, Bud Grant and Tom Landry and Vince Lombardi and Marv Levy. Like, just think of the oldest coach you could ever remember seeing on the NFL sidelines. Pete Carroll's going to be older than every one of them that's ever walked the sidelines. Amazing to me.
Well, I think we talk about so much now. They're hiring all these young guys because the kids coming out of college now, it's so much harder to relate to them than it maybe was 10 years, 15 years ago, because the landscape of college football has changed. I think Pete Carroll can relate to anybody. I've never heard a player say, hey, I didn't love playing for this guy. I wouldn't put my life on the line for this guy. So I don't think it matters. I think you bring in any of these young kids in the NIL era or whatever, Pete Carroll's gonna find a way to relate to him, and they're gonna give everything they have for him. And I think there are very few coaches still in the NFL that you can say that about.
And he's got their respect. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And what a great division where the head coaches are Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, and Pete Carroll. Like, sign me up to watch some of those games.
Without a doubt. And I hope they're good, because the NFL is better when the Raiders are, a team to talk about. So we'll see. I'm pulling for Pete Carroll. I think most people probably are. Let's move on to topic number 3, Shefty. From one interesting situation to, you mentioned it on Pat Show, maybe the craziest coaching situation you can remember in a long time. Kind of take me through everything that happened in Jacksonville with Liam Coen getting that job. I mean, it was like a daytime soap.
There have been some wacky coaching hiring cycle stories. Like the one that just jumps to mind, back in the day, Bill Parcells was very unpredictable. He would agree to a deal with the Falcons or the Buccaneers, and then for whatever reason, the job didn't get done. And I remember one time Chip Kelly came close to getting the Buccaneers job, and that didn't get done. And I remember the Buccaneers somehow always involved in this stuff, working out a trade to get John Gruden late at night and trading for Gruden to bring him in there. How about Josh McDaniels agreeing to become the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, only to back out of that and get cold feet? Like, that was wild too. Well, we've got a new entry into that category, and that is the Liam Coen situation that unfolded last week when he agreed to a deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to become the highest paid offensive coordinator in NFL history. And the Buccaneers have maintained that part of that deal was he couldn't talk to anybody else about a head coach opening. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars, on a different plane, there was talk all around the league that they should move on from Trent Baalke, their general manager. A lot of people around the league felt that. They didn't do that. Now, I can't prove this and we'll never know, but I believe that if they had fired Trent Baalke at the end of the season, I think they would have been competing straight up with the Chicago Bears to go hire Ben Johnson. And I'm not convinced that Ben Johnson would have chose Chicago over Jacksonville. We'll never know because it's a moot point. But because Trent Baalke was there, it scared away certain people. It scared away Ben Johnson, and it scared away Liam Coen. Jacksonville recognized this, made the move, knowing it lost out on the opportunity to compete for Ben Johnson and lost out on Liam Coen. Couldn't get Ben Johnson. He was hired by that time by the Chicago Bears, but Liam Coen hadn't signed his contract. And even if he had signed his contract, it wouldn't have mattered. He could still leave for a head coaching job. So they make plans to bring him in, and Shad Khan spearheads this effort to get Liam Coen in. And what was interesting was throughout the course of the day, on whatever day that was last week, Wednesday or Thursday, I'm getting calls from people in the Buccaneers saying, we can't get Liam. Something's going on. We can't get Liam. No one can find him. Now, Liam Coen's representation maintained that they called Todd Bowles to let him know. The fact of the matter is it was a wild 24 or so hours that wound up with Liam Coen in Jacksonville as the head coach. And look, I think Jacksonville was desperate. That's what I think. I think that they recognized that they missed out on Ben Johnson. They had an issue. They took steps to correct the issue after they should have, and it led them down a road that led them to piss off Tampa, get the guy they want. Look, again, and I've said this, but Liam Coen deserves the right to get a head coaching job and deserves the right to land the big money. And they're one of 32 jobs. Should have done it. But the Buccaneers felt like they should have been kept in the loop more than they were. And not that they were blindsided when it came out that he was there at about 6 o'clock on Thursday night or whatever that was. But the situation, I think everybody would have handled it a bit differently. The Jaguars, Liam Coen, maybe the Buccaneers too. It just created a wild scene that now goes down as one of the wilder head coach hiring cycle stories that I can remember. It goes into the annals with the Bill Parcellses and the John Grudens and the Josh McDaniels of the world. Just a crazy situation. There's always one of these things, right? Even in free agency, you get a guy like the deal is announced, he's reached agreement, then, oh, lo and behold, he reneges on the deal and he's signing a deal with another team that stepped in. And whoever steps in, that other team that had the agreement is pissed off at the player and the team. And it's no different here with Liam Coen. No different.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a lot of he said, he said. We don't really know the full breadth of the truth and where it lies. But, I mean, we're talking about Shoddy. You're right. I mean, he's completely – why wouldn't you take this job? You know, Shoddy's the hot name. He doesn't take a job, and he has to wait 16 years until he gets another opportunity. Who's to say that doesn't happen with Liam Coen, especially after what he did with the Bucs and, you know, completely revamping their offense, turning Baker into a borderline MVP candidate. How much of a say is he going to have in the new GM though? Because it's kind of, I mean, he's got 5 years of NFL coaching experience, never been a head coach before. That's a pretty big leap to let a first year head coach who is still a little green, pick the GM that he's going to be paired with.
He's going to be involved in the process. And I think here's a name that we need to have on our radar. I'm not saying he gets the job, but I will say that he's going to be in contention for the job. The Bears assistant general manager, Ian Cunningham. He's going to be a candidate for that Jaguars GM job. Some would say he might be the leading candidate for the Jaguars GM job. I don't know if he's the leading guy or a guy, but he's certainly going to be in the mix and a candidate to become the next head coach or the next general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Watch that name, Ian Cunningham. His time is coming.
Okay, so that'll be interesting. I personally, I kind of love this whole situation. Anything that's, a little bit out of the blue, different than just, oh, so-and-so is hiring so-and-so. We know it for, like
a little bit of drama, right? We don't have enough of it.
Yeah, exactly. This is awesome. So I love that. And then, you got Bucs fans. Obviously, the organization's pissed. You got Bucs fans pissed. An interview came out where Liam Coen basically said, hey, it's all about honesty. Like, that's what I'm all about. We need to be honest. And obviously Bucs fans had a field day with that. So should be interesting. Obviously, they've been a dumpster fire for a while now. But, if he can turn around Trevor Lawrence, then they made the right decision. Let's move on to topic number 4 of this week's Six Pack, Schefty. What do you make of Aaron Glenn going to New York with the Jets? I think, again, this was one of those ones where for a long time you kind of said, like, hey, this is going to get done. It's just a matter of time when it does get done. He had his introductory press conference yesterday. What do you think of Aaron Glenn in New York?
That soundbite that he had, buckle the seatbelt, get ready for the ride, that's going to be played whether the Jets are wildly successful or wildly unsuccessful. And as I saw that, I thought back to Adam Gase with his eyes wandering all over the place during the introductory press conference. It's amazing how often a coach delivers a moment that will live on and follow him. The exact quote was, put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. And it was delivered with a great amount of enthusiasm. So just think about it. If the Jets are going to the Super Bowl, they're going to play that, and everyone's going to be like, woo, Aaron Glenn knew it. And if they have played the way that they have in recent years and don't perform the way that Aaron Glenn wants, they're going to play that quote again. So either way, he delivered something that's going to follow him, and everybody's rooting for him to make it work out in his favor and to have the Jets turn around. But let's be honest here. I don't care that they hired Aaron Glenn as their head coach, and Aaron Glenn is a man of great character and a great leader, and Darren Muji is their GM, who I think has a chance to be a really good GM. Who is going to be their quarterback? Who are they going to get to compete with Josh Allen and Drake May and Tua Tagovailoa? Because if they don't have somebody like the AFC West, it doesn't matter how great Aaron Glenn is and Darren Muji is. They're not going to be able to survive, and we'll be getting another introductory press conference of another Jets head coach in 3 or 4 years if they don't fill that quarterback position. It's all about that. And it is hard not to root for Aaron Glenn because he's waited for this moment. He's done it the right way. It's what he's made of. It's in his fiber, and you want him to succeed. But again, it's going to be really hard to succeed without the quarterback. Just got to get that right. He's going to talk to Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what comes out of those conversations. We'll see what other quarterbacks are out there for this team. Darren Muji was on a Broncos team that looked a long time for a quarterback. He was a part of the group that tried to trade for Aaron Rodgers and couldn't get it done before Aaron Rodgers was eventually traded to the New York Jets. He was a part of the group that did trade for Russell Wilson. He was a part of the group that did draft Bo Nix. Darren Muji has done his fair share of work on quarterbacks, and he's going to be doing it again because that is going to be what defines the success that he and Aaron Glenn have moving forward. Again, both more than capable, both eminently qualified, both in need of that quarterback to prolong their careers with the New York Jets.
Yeah, and hopefully he gets a little bit of a runway here, and it's not, if they win 4 games next year, we have a Gerard Mayo situation. I don't think it will be because, he's kind of been a head coach in waiting for a while here. But if you're one of these quarterback needy teams right now, it's not a great year. It just isn't. There's not a bunch of free agent quarterbacks available. It's tough to believe that, Sam Darnold, who, he was the belle of the ball a couple weeks ago, but it's hard to believe that he would go back to New York and kind of try to right that wrong. Maybe he will. I doubt it. And then obviously you look at the draft and it's like, what? You got two guys who are going to go in the top five, but even then, people are split on that, which brings us to topic number 5 of this week's six pack. Shefty, there are some interesting comments coming out of Tennessee on how they view the number 1 pick. They obviously need a quarterback, but it doesn't sound like, I believe it was John Brinker who made the comments. It doesn't sound like he's necessarily talking about a quarterback.
Chad Brinker, the president, Mike Borgonzi, the GM. And to me, when they held their press conference to introduce Mike Borgonzi, there were 2 statements that were made that, to me, said an awful lot. The first was that they said, we're not going to pass on a generational talent at 1. Now, I think if you talk to most scouting evaluators, most draft experts, Mel Kiper Jr., Field Yates, whoever it may be, they would say that the quarterbacks in this draft don't appear to be generational talents. They're really good prospects, but not generational. The generational talents seem to be Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter from Penn State. So if that is the case, and they are interested in drafting a generational talent, that would seem to indicate that they are open to not taking a quarterback at 1. They also said we're open to trading back. So that would tell you that if there was one of these quarterbacks that they loved, they wouldn't be advertising it as quickly and as freely that they're willing to move back, sending out signals to a team like the Giants at 3 or the Raiders at 6, who both need quarterbacks, who both might be in the market to move up. So those 2 little statements that the Titans said, and it's early in the offseason, told me that we may not see a quarterback go number 1 to the Titans. We may see either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter go number 1 to the Titans, or we may see them trade the pick. So it just created a little bit of draft intrigue, but to me, it was the first sign that we may not get a quarterback at 1, and that sets the tone for the rest of the draft and all the conversations that will follow in the weeks to come.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Seeing Abdul Carter at the Orange Bowl in that Notre Dame game where he was hurt, a lot of people, there were questions whether or not he was going to play, and he absolutely dominated that game. I mean, he is unbelievable in person. Obviously, everyone saw what Travis Hunter did all year, but I mean, it's always tough to imagine, especially in a year where so many teams need quarterbacks, that we won't have teams just selling the farm to trade up to get to 1 or 2 to take either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. But that's why we go through the whole process. So, I mean, I suppose we will see.
But I don't know if Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders have the type of grades that Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels did last year.
Correct.
So I don't know that teams are going to be able to demand the ransom that they have in the past. I think that the prices that they ask, are going to be discounted some this year. Now, I might be wrong. Quarterbacks always come with a premium, and maybe teams will be willing to pay full freight to get up there. But I think grades on these quarterbacks, that the asking price that a team like Tennessee gets won't be quite as high as it's been in other years. We'll see if that's right.
That'll be something to keep an eye on post Super Bowl, after, the Senior Bowl and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, the Combine's right around the corner, so we'll get a lot more answers then as well. Let's move to the 6th and final topic of this week's six-pack, Shefty. We have the Super Bowl matchup locked. It's a rematch of a couple years ago. Fans they're excited. They're very pumped up that we're getting Chiefs-Eagles again.
Are they excited? I've heard a lot of...
No,
really?
I'm being a bit facetious there.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought.
Yeah. People are pissed. They're sick and tired of seeing the Chiefs. I don't understand the Eagles aspect of it. I think the Eagles probably, for a long time there, if it wasn't the Lions, we were talking about the Eagles being the best, most complete team in the NFC. People are sick and tired of seeing the Chiefs, but like we mentioned time and time again on this show, if you want to be the champs, you got to beat the champs, and no one's been able to beat them yet. So what stands out to you most about the Super Bowl matchup?
Well, first of all, for all the people who are tired of seeing the Chiefs, I got bad news. We may be seeing them for years to come, right? Yeah. This is not all that different from what we saw in New England. And it was how many Super Bowls for Tom Brady? 7?
Was it 6 in New England, 1 in Tampa?
I don't know the exact, there's so many that after a while, people got Patriots fatigue, and it went on. Patrick Mahomes has done more in his 20s than any quarterback ever has. And so this may just be the start of it. And people who are sick of the Chiefs now, they may have years of this. Years. So better get used to it and better accept the fact that we're looking at arguably one of the greatest football teams ever assembled. And you can say that because no team ever, obviously, has won 3 straight Super Bowls. The last NFL franchise to win 3 straight NFL titles was the Green Bay Packers in 1965 to 67. They did it in a day and age where there were 16 teams in the league, where over the 3 seasons, they had to win 7 playoff games total in full. The Chiefs can do that in 2 postseasons, right? So, maybe almost 3. But the fact of the matter is, they have had to win more postseason games than the Packers did. And they've had to do it in a day and an age where there's a salary cap, which they didn't have in the 60s. So there are a number of obstacles that this Chiefs team would have to overcome to be where it's at. And I think what people are forgetting is that this is just maybe the start of it. It's going to keep coming and coming and coming. It's another Super Bowl rematch. I think the previous 4 other times where we've seen 2 teams meet up with the same head coaches, the team that won the first game won. The Chiefs are in position to do that again. They're favored by, I believe, 1.5 to win this game. So the odds makers are giving them a better chance to win this game. That they've won 17 straight 1-possession games. Like, it's just incredible how they just don't ever beat themselves. Ever. They never make the mistake that costs them the game. They always find a way to make that one key play. And I know people may be bored of it. It may be tired, but I think we all can sit back and admire what they've done and recognize that it is greatness. And people love to hate the teams that are on. They love to hate the Yankees, love to hate LeBron, love to hate some of those franchises. But the fact of the matter is, that's where the Chiefs are at. You can hate it all you want, but you have to admire it, and we'll be watching it next week when we are in New Orleans.